Vanessa Paradis, after 2 decades of absolute silence, finally admits what she had never dared to say about Johnny Depp. It is not an accusation, not a reproach, just a truth cold enough to make all of France hesitate, a truth she kept locked inside her chest for 20 years, waiting for this day to turn the key. To understand why, you have to go back to where it all began. Vanessa Paradis stepped into the public light without noise. Very early on, she became a strange icon of France, small, fragile, but with a gaze covered by a thin layer of ice no one could reach. Success arrived quickly, violently, to the point that many believed she had been born to be under the spotlight, but those who really watched her knew Vanessa does not belong to the noise. She stands there because she had no other choice. Joe Le Taxi made her a phenomenon. That face, that slightly hoarse voice, that simplicity that became a trademark without her ever needing to force anything. The media called her the golden child of French showbiz. Magazines baptized her the muse of silence. But it is precisely this silence that makes her different. In a show business world that runs on scandals and little sound bites, she chooses to step back, no explanations, no justification, no one getting too close. The years go by, and Vanessa's beauty does not fade, it hardens. Her thin nose, her eyes that seem to see right through the person in front of her, her loose hair like a soft refusal. All of it creates an image that fascinates the public as much as it keeps them at a distance. She is the kind of artist you can neither possess nor define. Beautiful, but not according to blinding standards. A singer, but not according to technical standards. An actress, but not according to glamorous standards. She is simply herself, and that is enough to make her a legend. At each of her appearances, Vanessa brings a strange energy, silent, closed, but with such a strong magnetic pull that everyone eventually ends up looking at her. No need to smile, no need to talk too much. It is precisely the absence of expression that makes her haunting. Directors praise her finesse. The public loves her for a sincerity that never feels forced. The press, however, fears her because they cannot manipulate her with questions or flashy headlines. People are used to seeing her glide down the red carpet as if she does not walk to the same rhythm as everyone else. A smile that is rarely explained. A nod that is enough to end an interview. No one knows what she thinks. No one knows what she feels. And it is precisely that which builds a wall between her and the world. But there is one thing everyone agrees on. No one has managed to keep their dignity as long as she has in this industry. No scandal, no impulsive reaction, no emotional explosion. She exists through her calm, and that calm makes her dangerous in her own way. Yet behind this perfect image, there remains a silent truth. Vanessa still carries within her a kind of loneliness that is hard to name. An emptiness between her shoulders that makes all her beautiful photos carry a faint shadow of sadness. The public thinks it's just an attitude. But those who know her are aware. It is the result of a life spent choosing silence to protect herself. And it is precisely this silence, years later, that will make her confession about Johnny Depp more devastating than any scandal. Johnny Depp did not enter Vanessa Paradis' life in a dramatic blaze, but with a presence so discreet it becomes difficult to explain. They were not looking for each other. There were no flashes, no dramatic music to sanctify fate. Just 2 human beings stepping into the same space at the exact moment when each of them was missing something they could not name. The setting that evening was completely ordinary. A narrow hallway in a hotel in Paris. Yellow, dim light, the air slightly heavy with the smell of rain. Vanessa was leaving a room after a photo shoot. Johnny had just finished a private meeting with a few friends. No staging, just a coincidence. But that coincidence was enough to change the years to come. Johnny saw Vanessa first, not with the gaze of a man looking for someone, but with that of a human being lost in himself who suddenly stumbles upon an anchor point. Vanessa looked back at him without surprise, without mistrust. She noticed only one thing. In this man's eyes there was something that looked like a dark room where she herself had already set foot, a familiar fatigue, a solitude impossible to put into words. They did not talk much. A simple hello, a nod, then each continued on their way, as if everything was supposed to end there. But when the elevator doors closed, Vanessa realized her thoughts had been pulled further than she had wanted. She did not know if it was destiny, but she knew it was not a coincidence. The next encounters happened in a way that was almost too natural. No one went looking for the other, but somehow they always ended up in the same place, at the same table, in the same conversation. Johnny did not talk much, but his eyes said a lot. Vanessa spoke even less, but her silence made you want to understand her. Two different ways of living, one chaotic, the other grounded, that suddenly seemed to complement each other in a strange way. At that time, Johnny was going through an unstable period. Heavy roles, exhausting relationships, long nights drowned in thoughts. Vanessa, meanwhile, was at the top, but in the middle of the spotlights, she felt lighter when she was near someone who did not ask her to be perfect. There was a small, quiet moment, enough to announce what would follow. One evening, as they stood side by side in the middle of the noise of conversation, Johnny leaned slightly toward her and whispered, almost like a breath, "You make everything calmer." Vanessa did not answer, but her gaze changed imperceptibly, as if she realized she was standing exactly where she was meant to be. It was not the moment she fell in love. It was the moment when a woman understands she is about to step into a story from which she will not emerge unscathed. And from that instant on, even if no one said it, both of them knew their lives had just taken a different direction. The first months of Vanessa and Johnny's relationship had nothing of a fairy tale. They were simply calm, in a way neither of them had ever known before. Johnny, used to chaos, strangely began to slow down at her side. Vanessa, who had always walked gently to protect her privacy, felt for the first time that someone understood this slow rhythm. They did not need to talk much. Each day felt like a long, silent parenthesis, where they both found refuge from the noise of the world. Johnny often smoked outside. Vanessa made tea, and neither of them asked anything of the other. The silence between them was not emptiness. It was a rare form of safety, a peace that gave the illusion it could last forever. Very quickly, they became one of the most watched couples in the world. But what made them truly special was not their fame, it was the way they stepped away from it. No excessive red carpets, no staged romance, no exploitation of their love. They built a family in France as if to flee Hollywood's shadow. 2 children were born into a simple, normal environment where their parents tried to live like ordinary people. During this period, Johnny changed. He was less rebellious, less drifting. More than once, he said that Vanessa was the only one who makes me feel like I am not lost. That sentence was not a declaration of love. It was the confession of a man who had spent too long in the company of emptiness. Vanessa understood this. She knew that by her side stood a magnificent man, but one covered in deep cracks, and she believed that love would be enough to close them. But the most beautiful atmosphere is often the most fragile. When work took Johnny far away, the days of silence began to grow longer. He sank into darker roles. Shoots dragged on. A quiet fatigue settled in, without explanation. Vanessa waited, believed, kept a light burning for the two of them. But she started to see the change in his gaze, a kind of distance, slight but real. She said nothing. Johnny didn't, either. They let that gap grow like a crack under a pane of glass that is still intact. From the outside, everything remained perfect. They appeared together. They seemed attentive to one another. But inside, faint signals announced what everyone feared without wanting to admit it. One evening, Johnny came back from a long shoot. Vanessa asked him if he was tired. He smiled, but the smile no longer came from the place she knew. It was distant, heavy. It looked like someone hiding something he did not know how to say. Vanessa noticed it, but did not ask another question. From then on, she began to keep to herself many things she would have liked to express. Despite everything, she tried to keep the light in their relationship. She chose silence to preserve peace. She chose gentleness to prevent fractures. She chose to believe it was only a phase. But the truth was that their most beautiful light was slowly going out, fading little by little, almost without anyone realizing it. What makes this period so haunting is not that it was perfect, but that it made them both believe they could escape their destiny, believe that this love was strong enough to keep them standing. But what happened next proved one thing: even the greatest light does not always win against the darkness inside a human being. Johnny did not fall into darkness in a single day. It started with changes so minimal they could have been ignored. A message he replied too late. A missed call. A gaze that no longer really stopped on Vanessa's face. None of this was enough to trigger an alarm, but each detail lengthened the silence around her. His coldness was not loud. It felt like a room that loses its warmth hour after hour. Johnny became absent, not because of someone else, but because of himself. The heavy rolls dragged him into dark zones he no longer controlled. The nights filled up with alcohol, substances, and thoughts impossible to voice. Vanessa saw everything, but did not know where to step in. This was a man whose inner world was locked shut. She began to feel her emotional dependency. When he was weak, he came to her. When he was better, he moved away. When he needed something, she became his anchor. When he wanted emptiness, he disappeared inside their own house. This repetition slowly wore her down. She no longer knew whether she loved him or was in the process of saving him. And the most worrying part was that she could no longer tell the difference between the two. Conversations became rare. Vanessa's questions received short answers or a simple sigh. Johnny was not trying to hurt her. He simply no longer had enough strength to be fully present in anyone's life. It was not that he did not love her anymore. It was that he no longer loved himself enough. Vanessa endured everything in silence. She had never been the type to shout or demand. Her way of loving was light, constant, patient. But that patience slowly turned her, without her intending it, into a pillar on which Johnny leaned too heavily, to the point where she eventually could no longer stand. When he lost control, she tried to hold him back. When he was cold, she stayed warm. When he fell apart, she picked up the pieces. There were nights when Johnny came home with red eyes and a broken voice. Vanessa asked him what was wrong. He answered with a few empty words. She understood then. This was no longer the man she had met. It was a heavier, darker, more exhausted version, a man she would not be able to save, no matter what she did. She began to live with the feeling of being invisible. She went on doing what she had always done, but Johnny no longer saw it. Her efforts turned into air. Her silence was no longer heard. One day, standing in front of the mirror, she realized she was so exhausted she no longer recognized herself. She did not cry. Vanessa had never used tears as an escape, but the subtle change in her eyes said more than any sentence could. The worst slide did not happen in the moments when Johnny lashed out, nor in the nights of chaos. It resided in this simple fact: he no longer saw her. When a woman becomes a shadow in her own home, it is no longer about love. It is about erosion. One day, Johnny came back from a long trip. Vanessa stood in the doorway. He looked at her, but his gaze did not stop. It went right through her, as if she were nothing but empty space. That look was the final blow. Not loud, not violent, but enough to turn the woman standing in front of him into a ghost. From that moment on, Vanessa understood she was no longer at the center of his world. She was nothing more than a witness to the fall of a soul she had tried to save. You could sum it all up in one sentence. She didn't disappear. She just stopped existing in his eyes. The breaking point came on a completely ordinary evening. No argument, no door slamming, just a moment when Vanessa looked at Johnny and realized she had nothing left to hold on to. Johnny came home late, eyes tired, body unsteady. He sat down like a shadow. She remained standing, a few steps away, waiting for a word, a sign, something that would prove there was still a fragment left between them. But Johnny did not speak, did not look at her, did not ask for anything. He did not realize that her silence had become a plea for help. She was the one who spoke first. A simple sentence. "Are you okay?" Johnny answered without raising his head. "I don't know." That line was neither harsh nor cold, but it was enough to break something inside her. It was not a refusal. It was an absence. She understood that she was trying to hold on to someone who was no longer there. The house, that evening, was frighteningly calm. No shouting, no tears, no chaos. It was that quietness that made the moment heavier. Vanessa went into the bedroom and took a few things, not because she wanted to run away, but because she knew that if she stayed, she would end up becoming part of the abyss that was swallowing him. As she left the room, she looked at Johnny one last time. He did not turn around, did not say anything, did not try to stop her. He did not realize that the door about to close was the last one. Vanessa did not blame anyone. She was not angry. She left gently, like someone who has used up all her energy to stay, and who, in the end, must save herself. That night, as she stepped over the threshold, she understood that the emptiness inside her was no longer pain. It was the truth. A truth she had avoided for years. Love cannot save a soul that has chosen to sink. The door closed behind her without a sound, but it was the sound of the end of an era. And from that night on, nothing was ever the same again. 20 years later, Vanessa Paradis finally broke the silence. Not in a book, nor at a big press conference, but during a small interview, with a voice so calm that those listening to her stopped breathing. She did not want to tell her story, but she knew that a silence too long is also a way of disappearing. Her first sentence made France freeze. "No one knows how lonely I was during those years." It was not a reproach, not an attack, just a truth she had never spoken, in order to protect the man she had loved. She continued, in a light voice, as if she were talking about someone else. "I was by his side, but often he was already gone." A sentence strong enough to open up everything she had endured in silence. They asked her if she had any regrets. Vanessa shook her head. "I don't regret it. I only regret having erased myself without realizing it." The room went still. France heard that sentence and understood that the greatest tragedy for a woman is not loving the wrong person, but loving to the point of losing herself. She did not talk about the nights when Johnny sank into darkness. She did not recount the precise wounds. She spoke only of one feeling. "I didn't leave him. I left my own silence." The media were shaken by this extreme calm. The public was shocked, not by a scandal, but by this reality. Behind 20 years of silence, there was not a monstrous secret, but the discreet exhaustion of a woman who stayed too long behind the man she loved. Women everywhere shared her words. They said that Vanessa was not telling a love story. She was putting words to something many had already lived. "The moment you realize you have sacrificed too much," she ended with a sentence that silenced all debate. "I am not speaking to accuse, I am speaking to breathe." In the end, Vanessa Paradis no longer turns back to the past. She lives more lightly, chooses small spaces, chooses peaceful people, chooses a life that no longer asks her to prove anything. She no longer has to protect an image, no longer has to protect anyone, no longer has to justify her silence. Her mornings now are simple. Wake up, open the window, breathe in the cold air. She writes slowly, sings when she wants to, appears only when she feels it is necessary. Her life is not spectacular, but she heals day after day. Vanessa understands that suffering does not disappear. It simply stops controlling us when we stop trying to lock it away. She regains what she had lost for so many years, her own presence. When she is asked if she has forgiven those years when she was forgotten, Vanessa simply answers, "I don't need to forgive, I need to be free." And that freedom comes from one thing: having found her voice again after 20 years of silence. That voice is not a scream. It is a clear breath, enough to mark a new beginning.